to the Workforce Connections podcast, where we discuss workforce development in Southern Nevada. Here's your host.
All right, welcome to another edition of the WC podcast. I here am blessed Jack Martin to be interviewing the Executive Director of Workforce Connections, Jaime Cruz. How you doing, brother?
I am good, thank you. A little uncomfortable. I didn't know this what it felt like in this chair right here.
Well, it's just geography, brother. We're just going to have a good interview. We're just going to talk. I want to learn more about you, Jaime. You know, we've been friends now, or friends, co-workers, however you want to call it, for a couple of years now. So you have an incredible story that I get pieces of. So I'm going to try to weave this through. You know, originally you're from Peru. Anybody who hasn't hung out with Jaime for any length of time, you know the only place you're going to go to lunch is Peru chicken. And not only you're going to only go to Peru chicken, but you are going to get the country's, what do you call it? The entire meal.
The whole culinary journey.
Yes, thank you. The culinary journey from the lucuma dessert. Is it lucuma fruit dessert? Yeah. Which is incredible, to the green stuff.
The rice and chicken.
To the rice and chicken, to my favorite, the salchipapas, right? And then of course the Peruvian chicken, which is incredible.
Well, your dessert sandwich too. You like the dessert sandwich?
Yeah. What's that? Lucuma. What is it called again? The lucuma went. It's like
ice cream.
It's a fruit made into an ice cream in between two donuts, right? With then sugar on top of it, and then I go into a diabetic shock shortly after. But it is delicious. So, Mr. Cruz, you know what? So you're from Peru. What town in Peru?
Lima, Peru, the capital. Yeah, born and raised in Lima. But have, because I had family throughout other areas, rural areas, I have visited and spent summers in small rural areas in the mountains.
So help me understand Lima, Peru. What is if I was an outsider? Well, I am an outsider. If I was to go to Lima, Peru, what am I going to see first? What is the bustling agriculture? Is it a bustling agriculture town? Is it an industrial town? What are we doing in Lima, Peru?
Yeah, Lima is much like Mexico City. A metropolis of now 20 million people. You know, it's kind of like LA too, that it kind of, expands out, if you will, across valleys. And so you would find, a metropolis, if you will, that hugs the Pacific Ocean, but also now borders to the beginning of the Andes, which is, the Alps of South America. 20
million people. Wow! I would have lost that bet. That's the size of Los Angeles. I would have. I know you're incredibly bright, man. So I know you keep on top of what is the total population of Peru if it's 20 million there?
30 million.
30. Okay, so that it's kind of like here in Nevada, where Las Vegas makes up a big chunk of the total population.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So brothers and sisters growing up?
Yeah, I have a brother who's 5 years younger than me, who's here in Vegas as well with my mom. But then I also, through my father, I have 4 additional siblings who live in Argentina.
Okay.
Yeah, and a stepsister through my father also, who's a year older than me, that I spent some time also growing up with.
One of the glimpses into the short little windows we get into the Jaime life is I've seen pictures of you as a baby on a National World Cup picture of a soccer. I mean, what did Dad do for a living that you were out there? What were you, 6, 7 years old in that picture?
Yeah, 4 or 5. So my father immigrated from Argentina, if believe it or not, in the 40s. He was born in the 20s. In the 40s, he came to Peru as a professional soccer player. Before, he always tells me, that was before soccer players made a lot of money. They were still famous and had all the other benefits of, being athletes, but didn't make a lot of money. But he came to Peru with other Argentinians. They were first wave of immigrant players that came to Peru in the 40s. And then through his career, after he retired, he still remained in soccer. And so he became really good friends with who was then the manager or the coach of the Peruvian national team. And so he one day, just out of, I think they tell me I requested, I said, I want to go to the game and I want to put on the uniform like the players. They had to sew me a uniform, a tiny uniform, because, I asked for it. They first they gave it to me and they didn't have a number. So I started crying. So they put a number on it. They had to sew a number. But the interesting thing about the story is that particular game that I walked out to the field with the team won. And so the coach, who was Brazilians are very, superstitious. And if something works, you keep doing it. And so he said to my dad, he's got to come to every game now. And so they even took me to Mexico, which was the World Cup in 1970. I was the only kid that would walk on the field with with any team of the national team. So that's how I got there.
So what's your team now? Obviously, when these guys walk you on, is that a professional team, or that's the national team?
That's the national team. Yeah.
Right, so that's your number one team forever and ever, because the coach adopted you and made you their mascot, for lack of a better term. What's your professional team?
Yeah, so in Peru, like you said, you always grow up. It's the national sport. So I, in 2018, followed them to Russia, to the World Cup again. You know, all those years later, I went to Russia and saw them play. But in Peru, much like here, you have kind of like an equivalent to the NFL. And so there's a lot of professional teams in Peru. And because my father, as I said, when he retired, he was a manager of one of those teams. I was actually born. My dad had a house inside the facilities, if you will. Imagine, I'm sure, the Raiders have a complex here, but I don't think the owner lives there. And I don't know if anybody lives in that complex, but my dad did. And when they brought me home from the hospital, that's kind of where I lived and grew up. So that is my team. It's called Sporting Cristal.
Sporting Cristal.
Yeah, from Peru.
Nice. Did mom work? Did she have a career also?
Yeah, when I've heard the stories, and it's interesting because, right, when mom tells a version, dad tells a version. I don't know. Somewhere in the middle, there's the truth. But she tells me, that when she was being pursued by him, she was working at a travel agency. And so, but when I was born, she stopped working and didn't go back to work until probably 2-3 years later when I went into, or 4 years later when I went into kindergarten.
Yep. So having now lived here, growing up in Peru, did you always know you wanted to come to the U.S.? Was this something that came later in life? How did that journey? Well, I shouldn't go. Let me go back a little bit, because I know you have an extensive career before you came to the United States. So you went to high school. I assume you played soccer, probably a pretty high-level soccer player, if I had to guess, if your dad was a professional. So what was next? I mean, after you leave high school, I imagine, knowing as bright as you are, unless you really just dialed it back a dot, you're probably a pretty accomplished student. What was next? I
always tell my kids, because, again, seeing them go through elementary, middle, high school, and in college here, my daughter got to play collegiate basketball in California. And I think the genetics from my dad skipped a generation. She got more than I did, but I still hustle. And so through high school, I played soccer. Again, my dream, until somebody knocked sense into me, I thought, I'm going to be a soccer player like my dad. Like every kid here wants to be an athlete. Right. And so I was good enough and probably hardworking enough to make the high school team. And I think what helps also is that here, unlike here where my kids got to choose between basketball, football, wrestling, baseball, all the things that you can do in high school, here in Peru, you only have 3 choices. You choose either football, or football. Which one do you want? And so I think having that narrow choice helped me probably be good enough to play through high school. And then I also played through college. When I was in high school and contemplating what my route was going to be, there was on vocational day, there was a young man who came that was roughly 2 years older than I was, and roughly from the same neighborhood where my school was. And he was wearing just a really sharp white uniform from the Merchant Marine Academy. He was a cadet, so he had the 2 stripes here. He had the golden, gold buttons with the, all the cool emblem stuff. And when he told his story, I said he was just like me. He was a guy, and back before we had, Facebook pages and things, they would bring photos on those folded things, that you buy at Walgreens. I don't know what they're called, but for science fairs.
Right, exactly.
And so, the guy folded his thing and showed, this is me in Rome, this is me in Milan, me in Egypt. And I thought, man, why not me? I would like to, go to Rome. And so that's how my decision was made to go to college at the Merchant Marine Academy. And, I got to see, as a young man, not just play soccer there, of course, but got to see 27 countries before I left the Merchant Marines.
What did you study in the Merchant Marines?
Engineering. You could choose between being a pilot that leads you, puts you on the bridge, and you learn all about navigation and loading a ship, and then you can become a captain of the ship. Or you can be in communications, which is the radio, telecommunications, logistics on the ship. Or you can be an engineer, which means you are in charge of all the propulsion, the generating the electricity on the ship, filtering the water, all those systems, pumps and boilers and things. That's what I chose.
How long were you in the Merchant Marines?
So I was a cadet for 4 years in the academy or the university, and then 3 years as an officer.
And then after that, so at what point during all this, you'd seen 27 countries. So I got to ask, out of 27 countries, what was your favorite and why?
Yeah, probably it's hard to pick one, but I'll tell you the most memorable, because I'll never forget it, was Brazil again. They have this thing called Carnival. And it is literally days of a nonstop party. It's Mardi Gras on steroids. And so I remember, again, I was 17 years old and, just eyes wide open. And you lose, I lost, if you will, my teammates, my colleagues, my peers. There's a sea of people dancing and parades and things. And I didn't find them for 12 hours. But it seemed like only 1 hour had gone by. And so that experience of Carnival, I will never forget. It was an energy and a noise level and a colorful thing that I've never seen anywhere else.
So what were you drinking? 17 years old. What were your mom? You're over the age. You're over the age now. What's the beer to drink in Peru or I'm sorry, Brazil during Carnival? What were we drinking?
They have this thing called cachaça.
Cachaça.
And they make it out of sugar cane, so it's like our moons.
My man over here is nodding. He heard cachaça. He said, "Oh yeah, this will tear you up. This will tear you up." So sugar cane and what else?
They distill that, and then they'll mix it with. They have different ways to mix it with lime. Others with condensed milk, but it's always something that you don't feel it, and
it's like Peruvian moonshine.
Yeah, dangerous stuff.
So, at what point after seeing 20, you've seen the world? How many times you crossed the equator?
I lost track of time. I think it's at least over 20. But the most memorable one is the first time. When you cross the equator, there's a ceremony that the old timers put together on a ship, on a merchant vessel. And it usually happens when you're a cadet, because by then, again, so you're a cadet. The first time you cross the equator, the officers put together a surprise thing. You don't know when it's happening. You know it's going to happen because you hear about it, but you don't know when. So sometimes you walk out of your shift, and then behind you, they put a bag on top of your head, and two big guys got you. It's happening. And so they bring you to the deck, and when they pull off the bag, you see everybody's in costumes. Like the captains usually looks like Zeus, and Neptune, and all these mythological characters with the big, Triton fork, and they have octopus costumes. It's just crazy. And so the whole thing is that they have to christen you or baptize you. You're no longer a rookie without crossing the equator, and so they give you a Marine name, if you will, nickname. They baptize you a Marine nickname and kind of accept you.
I think we might need to know what that Marine nickname became today, don't we?
Accept you. One of the things that you can't share, it's like a secret society.
Oh, now we can't share it.
And so, but that's really memorable because, again, when you're experiencing it, you're a little scared because they all that's happening, and they're very ceremonious about it, and King Neptune comes and, gives you your name, and then they dunk you into a very, very foul pool of everything you can imagine. They pull the guy that's in charge of the meals, brings big dead frozen fish, chickens.
Yuck.
I mean, it's just yuck. Yeah, and so they dunk you in there, and out you come. Now a member of the Marine, the Merchant Marine family.
Anything you remember about the horizon that day? Is there anything different about, as somebody who's never crossed the equator, is there anything different about that? Or you were so busy smelling like chicken and fish, you were just ready to be done?
By the time, when I crossed, it was nighttime, which is, again, yeah. So, yeah, and so but they set up lights, much like these lights in this studio. They set up lights to make sure that everything is, that you can see what's happening. Again, they make it a production. It's kind of, I've always appreciated it because you go through that once yourself, and then you do it many times for other, kids. The next year you see kids younger than you happening. And then sometimes it's rare, but sometimes older men that join the Merchant Marines, not as an officer path like I did, but they just get a job as a carpenter on the ship or a machine person on the ship. And they have to go through it as well. And it's a little different for them to see an older man go through it. It's not the same as a 17, 18-year-old.
So out of all those experiences, how do you land on the shores of the United States of America? How'd you end up coming? Was it a desire? Did you chase a girl? How does it happen? Because us men, we do a lot of stupid stuff to land where we land, right?
Yeah, I wish I had a story like that where I was chasing a girl, but no, it was. I was in Liverpool, and in many ports that I've been. I remember that night I had been just in this place where the Beatles got initiated. It's called the Tavern. The Tavern, a pub where they used to play, and there's the photos and all that. And as I walked home after dinner, I would always call. 10 hours ahead, so I would calculate and call home, if you will, Peru. Before cell phones, you'd have to use the radio from the ship. They would call the central headquarter office in Peru, and then they would connect you via, back when telephones still had to be connected to wherever you were calling. In this case, my mom was here at the United States at that time with my younger brother, and so that call was what led to come here. I talked to her, and she wanted to go back to Peru for personal reasons, and she kind of said, could you come and be with your brother? And I had been already 3 years, if you will, sailing all over. And that's kind of what happened. I said, yeah, I'll take a break and go spend a year with my brother in the States. I'm sure I can find a job there. I said, I'm an engineer. And so that's how I came here. So,
and what was your title in the Merchant Marines at that time? Lieutenant, captain?
Yeah.
Are there equivalent titles?
When you graduate from the Merchant Marine Academy, you graduate with two things: a rank, which is ensign, reserve. It's the starting rank on the officers for the Merchant Marine. But depending on what occupation you picked, you can either, if you were a pilot, you'd be a third pilot, second pilot, first pilot, captain. If you're an engineer, third engineer, second engineer, first engineer, chief of engineering. So I was only 3 years in. I was a third engineer, or the entry level officer, if you will, for engineering. I would manage a shift, about 6-8 people that were again running the operations for those 8 hours on a ship, watching generators, chillers, main propulsion rooms. I was in charge of that crew.
Of a massive merchant ship that's literally transporting materials all across our world.
Yeah, these ships, if you go to Long Beach Port, you can see them there, but they're literally, the size of 3 football fields, and they carry anything from containers carrying cars to oil or grain, depending on what style of the ship, yeah.
And then, so you come to Vegas. Was Mom living in Vegas? What was she doing in Vegas at the time?
Yeah, Mom was living in Vegas with my brother, who had at that time decided to, they had come to Vegas, I think, 4 years. I was in the academy when they came. My brother kind of, he was, if I rewind back to that time, remember about the World Cup in Mexico? My mom, after Mexico, made a stop here in the States, and my brother was born in the States. Mm-hmm. And so that gave him the, as an American-born citizen, he at the age, at any age, he could choose. Before 18, he had to kind of choose, what do you want to be, an American or a So he, at the young age, said, I want to go be an American. So my brother is an American citizen. He was born here. He could be Peruvian if he wanted to, but he chose American. So that's how they ended up here. He said, Mom, I want to go back to the United States and try that out. So they were here. He was having lots of fun. But my mom wasn't. So.
What year are we talking?
This was 1987.
1987.
Yeah, he was going to high school at Valley High, home of the Vikings.
Home of the Vikings. Home of Greg Maddox, one of our favorite pitchers, right?
Yeah. Right. And Andre Agassi.
Oh, I didn't know Andrew. Yeah. And my assistant director, Mike Wheelahan.
Wow, that's a bunch of stars.
Wheelahan, he's really changed the world for a lot of children. Uh-huh. So 87, you land here. Mm-hmm. You were third engineer on a massive ship. I remember the story you telling me, like you literally came here and now you had to start at the bottom. So what was starting at the bottom? What did that mean?
Well, I didn't think I would start at the bottom. I went to MV Energy. Back then it was called Nevada Power, Southwest Gas, the Las Vegas Water Valley District. I mean, anywhere where they had equipment that I knew I could fix, maintain, and ask for jobs. I said, I'm an engineer. I can do this stuff. And unfortunately, the reality I found out is that nobody will give you a job unless you have experience here. And you can't gain experience unless somebody gives you a job. So it was this chicken and an egg thing that I couldn't break. And so after, I think, about 4 weeks of frustration, I finally said to my brother's boss. My brother was working in this restaurant called The Vineyard. It was an Italian restaurant on the Boulevard Mall. And so I said to this old Irishman, Jack, I said, nobody will give me a job. I said, and I need a job if I'm to stay here. I looked at his refrigeration equipment, and I said, I can fix that stuff. Can you give me a job? And he said, I contract that out. You must have a licensed, contractor in this state. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't let you fix that. And I said, I'm not leaving this restaurant until you give me a job. I said, I need a job. My brother's got a job. And so he said to me, this is way, beneath your skill set. I said, the only opening I have now is a dishwasher. And so I took the job. I became a dishwasher that day at the Vineyard in 1987.
We're talking $3.35 an hour?
$3.75.
$3.75.
Yeah.
Right here. How many people were living in Las Vegas in 1987?
About almost 400,000.
400,000. What part of town were you living in?
Right across the Boulevard Mall, there's a little street called Dumont and Stewart. I was right there, and those. They told me in the 70s those were like the place to be, high luxury condominium stuff.
Not in the 80s?
No, not in the 80s.
So how long were you a dishwasher?
I think about somewhere between 3 and 6 months, because one day, and I was grateful for that job, but one day I started to really notice that food servers were coming into the kitchen, not just with their dirty plates, which they gave to me, but after they throw their dirty plates in the soapy water, they would pull singles dollars and $5 out of their aprons or their pockets. And I just didn't understand what was happening, because the only time I got money was, a check was on Fridays by the time clock. And so I asked the Irish guy again, said, his name was Jack, John Sheridan. Jack, I said, what are those? And how come I can't? Well, those are called gratuities. I said, oh, gratuities or tips. And I said, well, how do I get me some tips?
He said you can either become a stripper or you can go out there and serve some food.
Yeah, he told me, you could be a food server, or before that, a busboy. I said the busboys get, tipped by them. And so I said, I want to be a busboy. And so it wasn't short of that I got promoted to busboy. And then shortly after that, food server. And eventually Jack told me, which I appreciate, he said, I want you to go to the Las Vegas Hilton and ask for Dominic Parisi. He was the manager for room service. And he said he worked for me years ago here, like you do, as a food server. But he said he can give you a job over there with insurance, which, we didn't have the health benefits there at that restaurant. It's a culinary job. You can get, insurance and these different benefits. And so I went and I met the guy, and he offered me a job on the spot. And so I called Jack and I said, hey, and he said, well, great. When do you start? And I said, well, don't I have a choice? He says, no, your last day here is Friday. He said, you're gone. And so he really pushed me out, and which I'm grateful, because Dominic picked me up from there, and I got the experience that I needed to then get to the Mirage. Having that experience, again, it's all back to the story about you needed the experience at the Vineyard to land at the Hilton. You needed the experience at the Hilton to apply to the Mirage, which was just opening, and that's how I landed at Mirage. Back then it was called Mirage Resorts, then became MGM Mirage, and then MGM Resorts, but I spent 20 years in that company.
20 years. Well, you started if I remember the story correctly, you were a banquet server there first, right?
Yep.
You stood there, and then being a banquet server in the city of Las Vegas is not a bad career, but It wasn't your chosen career, right?
Yeah, you can make, back then, and still now in some properties like Wynn, Bellagio, you can make six figures being a banquet server, yeah.
And so you're making six figures. Yeah, I'm sure by this time you've met the love of your life, right? You got your baby mama drama starting, right? So now, what's next? What's next? I mean, because you didn't only work for MGM for 20 years. You at the very end of it, you were riding on the corporate jet, right? So there's a big leap from, hey, I'm serving rubber chicken at the cafe, or not at the cafe, at the banquet, to now I'm riding corporate jet style. How does that happen?
Yeah, and the banquet life taught me a lot. People don't realize that the banquet waiters. There is the nights of the rubber chicken, as you said, but there's also the nights of the big Asian high rollers where there's, not 7, but 17 course meals, where you see this very exotic foods and very expensive wine and the white glove and all these things that you have to learn to do to cater to this high-end customer that those hotels have. So I learned a lot there, but at the end of the day, like you said, I really was craving the satisfaction that I would get from my earned, if you will, education, right? I had trained to be an engineer, to critically think, to solve problems. And so it wasn't until 1993 when we were opening Treasure Island that I got my opportunity to be an engineer. They gave, before they offered jobs to the outside, they offered, it's called the first shot. Everything had a pirate theme. It's the first shot program, and you got to, if you had a swing shift or a grave shift at the Mirage and you wanted to go to day shift, or if you worked in housekeeping and you wanted security, or in my case, if you worked in food beverage and you wanted to go to engineering, this was your time. And so that's how I finally got back to engineering. I left banquets to go be an engineer at Treasure Island.
Graveyard, fixing toilets, fixing sinks, fixing.
I was lucky that I got I was off Monday, Tuesdays, I still remember, and but it was a 6 to 2 job, and it was a lot less money than the banquets job, but it did bring me back to, like you said, I was able to. I was put in the mechanical department, so it wasn't the hotel rooms where the toilets and the showers are, but it was in the mechanical rooms where the chillers are, which are used to cool the buildings, the boilers to produce the hot water for the rooms and the kitchens, the steams, the pumps. So all those things that I saw on the ships were in the hotels, and that's where I landed.
Just on a massive, massive scale, right?
Yeah.
Right? So engineer 1, engineer 2, engineer 3, you've told me some stories about having shark fin soup in these rooms and being the boss of these massively complex. One of the jokes that I love messing with Jaime around, because when we walk around any kind of a building, Jaime has been beat to death with this 20 years being in the hospitality business at a very high level, right? So we'll walk around and Jaime will be like, see the scuff on the bottom of the floor there, see the paint chip on the wall there, see the chair is not pushed in properly. I mean, this is the life. So not only did you get engineer, which already has an exacting kind of science to it, now you had that reinforced with 20 years in hospitality, right? So how do you get to the very top of your trade in MGM?
Yeah, what you just explained, 3 nights ago I was at Resorts World, and got to see some old friends. And like you said, it's a blessing and a burden sometimes, because that I could not keep my eyes off things, and my friends would tell you, stop looking at that stuff because it's not your job. But I couldn't help myself to look at those things. But I think what helped me at MGM was the fact that company, number one, I'm always grateful they gave you opportunity. They invested in me. They gave me executive development. They gave me opportunities to learn things like, for me, it was automation. So in the late 80s or early 90s, the casinos, or these large buildings, transitioned from what was called pneumatic controls, which is compressed air. You would walk into these rooms, you hear psst, 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 and these pneumatic controls were driving valves and all different kinds of things, dampers, to direct digital control. So the era of computer and microchips. And so I, if you will, rode the beginning of that wave in the early 90s, learned how to do automation, learned how to use, the first software programs to make sure that these buildings were not running all the time. And so now you were able to, from a laptop at home, if you will, with a modem, beep, 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 you were able to turn off things, turn on things. And so
dial in.
Yeah, the dial in. And so again, I think that helped me, if you will, build a niche for myself. I still remember one day I walked into the CFO's office of Treasure Island. They called me. They said, hey, I was the, if you will, my job was to monitor consumption of electricity. And so they like predictability in the CFO's office. So if our monthly bill for electricity is $250,000, they get upset if it's $100,000 the next month. Because I think it happens at home too. If they misbill you, they don't forgive you. They come back the next month, and so they like their budgets to be predictable. And so they call me and say, hey, our bill has, gone down, and I don't want this problem. And I had to fess up. I said, it's not a problem. I said, I've been tinkering with some settings and some automation, and that's repeatable. That's going to be happening every month now because we're turning off lights and we're turning off fans and we're turning off pumps when we don't need them. And so the CFO said, you're telling me that this $50,000 is something we're going to have for perpetuity? So 10 months from now, it's $500,000? I said, yes. So they said, you're the new energy manager. So they promoted me and made me the energy manager of that property.
So the old energy manager, where did he go?
There wasn't one.
Okay. So
I was because again, I think that job of watching that kind of stuff didn't exist, and that's why I think I was the first energy manager in the company, and then the property next door was Mirage, and so of course the CFO from the properties get together, and when he heard what was happening, he said, well, I want some of those savings, and so the guy said, well, will you pay half of his salary? He said yes, and so I became the energy manager for 2 properties, and they shared my salary. I got a promotion, a bump, and started to do it for 2 properties. And then somebody in corporate saw that 2 properties from the portfolio of 13 buildings had consistently reduced the cost of electrical, gas, and water. And so they made me the director across all, corporate director of energy and environmental services.
For 13 properties on the Strip.
Yeah.
So from a town in Peru to the Merchant Marines to a dishwasher, and within 10 years to the very top of a brand new position in MGM.
So this year, I think, was 2003 when I got that corporate job. And so that would have been 16 years after I arrived. Yeah.
Good for you. That's a great story. So with that, you can't, I hear the stories about working at the MGM. As a matter of fact, before we got on the air, you gave me one story I can't repeat. I've been sworn to secrecy, right? So we have to know something outside of your engineer hat here, because you're going to tell us the most conservative story you know. Give us a good one, Jaime. What is the best part about working for MGM? Or one of the, I don't even want to call out MGM, one of the properties on the Strip.
Yeah. I think I told you, and you saw it when you went to visit my friend Dave at Resorts World. One of the coolest perks is that when you're an executive, you get signing privileges, And so that's the first time, that I've again been able, like you said, to taste, delicacies that are too expensive from my wallet. And because, and again, and the properties want you to, because once, and especially if you're bilingual like I was, sometimes you get asked to interact with guests from Spanish-speaking countries and entertain them and introduce them to these offerings that the house has. Like, again, Kobe beef. I had never tasted Kobe beef until I was an executive, and I get exposed to those kinds of things. Bird's nest soup. Or, all these different things that, the Asian high rollers, gamblers would. And so I think that exposure to those things is something that was really cool for me that I probably never would have gotten anywhere else.
So that's now how you got the pinky in the air, come to my house when we're drinking bourbon, and you swish it around and you
open it up.
Smell it. Oh, yeah. I remember 1983, you weren't swishing nothing around.
No.
You were chugging it in a Brazilian party, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good for you. Ever get to fly on the corporate jet?
Yeah, I think that's a cool experience too, because, now, especially after 9/11, when the world changed for us, and, taking off your shoes, being there an hour early, all that stuff. When you fly in the corporate jet, you show up 10 minutes before it leaves, and you walk through this gate, and you climb the stairs, and you take off. It's amazing.
They're not serving wild turkey on that jet, are they?
No, that's good stuff.
It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Where was the farthest you went on the corporate jet? I don't know why this interests me. I've never been in a corporate jet. I really have no desire to, but to me, it just sounds so decadent, right? It just sounds to me like, I remember you telling me a story about talking to our prior governor and asking him, and he said, what's the best part? He was riding on the corporate jet. Yeah,
it's fun. And I think the farthest for me was Biloxi, Mississippi, was the furthest flight I did.
Did you lose a bet? Why'd you get stuck with that trip?
No, it wasn't stuck. Biloxi, Mississippi has a property called Beau Rivage, which is beautiful Riviera, but it has a really unique feature. The Gulf of Mexico is, if you will, is very much flat. So if you stood on the beach there in Biloxi, in the ocean, you could literally walk miles before the ocean takes down. So and I didn't know this because they put us in a boat, and for an hour and a half we went out, I don't know how many miles, for an hour and a half in a small boat, and we reached this little lodge, a floating lodge. And it was only 10 feet off because they say jump off the boat. I said, I'm not jumping. I'm like, no, jump off the boat. And I jumped, and yes, if you went just a little bit down, you could touch the floor of the ocean, which was really crazy. But so we went to see that lodge. It was a new feature for the property, a fishing lodge where you could take, again, the high rollers and give them that very customized fishing experience. They're sleeping, eating their meals right there in the middle of the ocean. And again, with that boat, within an hour, they can be fishing for really exciting game out for, big fish.
Is that place still there?
I don't know if it's there. I don't even know if the MGM still owns that property.
That's crazy. I mean, that's one of the things I've really learned that I've found interesting about the Strip, right, is there's so much, there's constant change here, right? And it irritates me on so many levels, right? I go to these historic towns. Me and you just spent some time in Washington, D.C. together. We get to see these buildings built in the 1700s and this beautiful character that they have, right? And here in Las Vegas, it gets 20 years old, just get knocked down. We're putting up, we went from pink flamingos to pink neon all over this town, right? So I think we sometimes erase our history in this, kind of this conspicuous consumption model. But, so that was the best part. What was the worst part about being on the Strip or just working on the Strip?
I would have to say, especially if you have a family, I think, like I did, a young family, the hours, right? Because the higher you climb on the hierarchy of a property, the more they need you at any time of the day. And so, again, as you know, by knowing Dave, sometimes it could be midnight and you're in the middle of your sleep and you have to get out of your bed and go address an issue because, again, these properties never shut down. The operations and the revenue that's happening depends on having reliable water at every, fixture, reliable air conditioning, all these things. And so sometimes you lose sleep or time on the weekends with your family. Or they, again, put you on a plane to go as far as Macau because there's a problem in Macau, in China, and the China property that you have to help solve.
So you leave this and you come to work for us. That's where I met you. How long have we known each other now? 12 years? 12?
Yeah, I came in 2009, and I think you joined the board.
Shortly after, probably 2013 maybe?
Yeah.
2013?
Yeah.
We didn't really spend a lot of time with each other, right? Remember, you always loved to make fun of it. Me and Dr. Villalobos were closer.
You were on Team Villalobos.
I was Team Villalobos, 100%. When after Ardell passed, and God rest his soul, there was conversation. Rick had already left and gone to and chased his new career. I didn't know you. I didn't know your skill set. I didn't know any of this stuff we're talking about, which is why, me, I love this connecting with people. So now you're here. The board was dysfunctional. I remember sitting on the board meeting and looking to the left of me, and there was Ardell, there was Rick, there was you,
Heather.
Heather was there, right? And then
Kostecki.
Yeah, and Kostecki, right? And then so Ardell leaves. You become the new executive director. That was tumultuous as it was.
But that was after you said, "Could we bring back Dr. Villalobos?"
I did say that. And I have since also apologized. Do I need to do it on microphone now?
No.
I made a mistake, world. Whatever camera's on me, I made a mistake.
No, he would have done just as good.
I love Dr. Villalobos, but Jaime has done an incredible job. Have I repaid my debt to society now? All right. Are you done breaking my balls about it? All right. Oh, I mean, you've done an incredible. I literally remember those first days, and to my right, this guy is from the community college is yelling at somebody, and this nonsense happening. And we had like 30 pink papers to discuss at this meeting, and it's my first meeting. I don't know what a pink paper is, and people are yelling all over the place. To today, where I would argue that then we weren't serving very many people, and the discussion was all around how many people could we serve for $1,500 a client. And I'm like, well, what can you learn for $1,500 a client? What is that doing? What are we accomplishing? All we're doing is keeping a lot of little businesses, well-intended, great businesses, wonderful people, I'm sure, but it wasn't the most efficient way to run our organization. And, so you land here, you were, what was your title? Chief Strategy Officer? Which
yes.
I still don't understand what the hell that means. I got to be honest. And so now you're the ED. So now What is it like?
ED stands for Executive Director. Let's just make
yes,
sure.
Yes, it does. I apologize. Yes, it does. And I promise not to talk about your paycheck. Remember, you made me pinky swear. I'm just kidding. He did not do that.
But I think what you said is true, that we have come a long way. But it's not one person. I do appreciate that you, say that to me, that I've played a role. But also, I'm grateful that you stayed. Despite that dysfunction, some people left. Some people stay, you stayed, and it's taken a lot of us, a group of us. You put in work as well to help us change all that. Like you said, today, if you fast forward all the way through those years, I think just two weeks ago, we had a board meeting where we moved $20 million in 37 minutes. And why? Because I think we're now focusing on quality and not just quantity. We are focusing on the fact that the work gets better done if we don't do it by ourselves, if we do it with the harbor, if we do it with the libraries, if we do it with the Chambers of Commerce and the LVGA. So that was a big journey. It's, I think, 4 or 5 years in the making. But again, credit to, the people that it took to make happen. As you know, we had to get the right people in the right seats, with Dr. Jara joining our board, Dr. Saragosa, Mary Beth Sewell, Peter Guzman, all the stakeholders from the right members of the community to move the needle. That's what we're blessed with. So I'm grateful to the local elected officials, my bosses, that they have brought in great board members to help us do the work.
And people willing to do the work, including our local elected officials, because there's been some tough decisions that have had to be made to move this needle, right? So I tell people all the time, somebody was asking me the other day, they hadn't met you. I was at Knob, and I was trying to describe you, and I was trying to Knob, for anybody who doesn't know, I apologize.
Fun-loving,
right?
Handsome.
Right. Well, first of all, it's the National Association of Workforce Boards, and we've gone a couple of times, but I try to describe it. I go, he's super smart. He's an engineer. I go, he's super analytical, right? He will pick apart everything you tell him, down to the most minute detail, right? And he hears detail. He doesn't hear... there's no emotion in what he hears. You could be describing him, hey, Jaime, your mother just died. What'd she die of? It would be very. You want to know that stuff first before you go into the next phase. I'm the opposite, right? I want to know where the emotions are before I learn the facts, right? And it's just different leadership styles. But we went from this place where we were completely dysfunctional to winning the Super Bowl of workforce boards during the pandemic. One of the things I think of you often when I'm thinking about Vegas, I would have never bet in a million years that strip would have ever shut down. And I remember riding my Harley up that strip, and it literally having cops parked on the corners of the intersections, making sure the places aren't getting whatever. But it was surreal. It looked like something out of a bad zombie movie, right?
Yeah, no, you're right, and you're not the only one that never dreamt it. I think I've shared this story with you when we build these buildings. The last one I did, or was a part of, I should say, was the City Center complex where Aria is, Vidara, the Mandarin, all those, that complex. Until the pandemic, hotels are not built with locks, meaning the front doors. Now you might find them, but before the pandemic, you go to a hotel, there's never a lock because it never closes. And so nobody planned for it, like you said. And so the hotels had to scramble and install locks on doors that were never intended to be closed. It was...
It's incredible. Did you drive down? It was an incredibly lonely feeling on my Harley, listening to my pipes pop off these empty buildings where usually it's music and people and hustle and bustle. And even in 2008-9, when I moved here during the middle of the recession, when that strip was damn near empty, those buildings were still open and people were still employed.
Yeah, for me, and you're right, by the way, about who I am. You know me too much, I think, because when I was driving down the strip, what I was thinking of was, these hotels that I know and been in all these years. I said, I wonder if they shut down, the water pipe, and I wonder who's taking care of this. And because, as you know, in a car, if you don't turn on the car and those oils don't circulate and those gaskets and those, things dry up. And so same with a building. If you shut down things, you're going to find problems that you didn't have before when you restart. So I was thinking, they're
completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different mindset. You're thinking, how much money is it going to cost to restart this now that they've shut it down for 6 months? That is hilarious.
All the problems that we're going to see.
So 400,000 employees on the resort corridor are now out of work for 4 months where we shut down, 4 to 5 months?
I think so.
Right. As a workforce executive director, where did we pivot? Walk us through the needs of this community. Are we still feeling those needs? We made some pretty incredible pivots, I believe, to keep some stuff awake. So walk us through that, the loan program, the payroll supports, some of that stuff. Walk us through that.
Yeah, it was an unprecedented event, like you said, that merited unprecedented responses, right? And again, because of the work we put in pre-pandemic, which you were a part of, we improved our dealer relationship tenfold from where it was, when you and I joined this organization. It's amazing now. It really is. Yesterday I was with the director of Dieter at the Small Business Fair at the Sahara West Library. She presented to the governor our most recent national award for the Employee MV Business Hub from the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals, which we officially will be recognized for when they come into town next week. But again, I think that when it happened, if you will, nobody knew how we were going to respond. We didn't even know. And so when we pivoted really on a daily basis. The first thing we felt was lines at these centers from people who were just laid off and they needed access. They thought they could find another job, but that wasn't the case. So then they just needed access to the unemployment insurance system. And that system crashed because of the influx that nobody ever designed the system for. So now we had people out of work, no unemployment check, discouraged. It was just...
No toilet paper, obviously, because everybody was in line for that crap, right? What was that all about?
I don't know what COVID does, but yeah, I don't know.
Liquor and toilet paper,
yeah.
Remember? I remember walking through a store over on the Green Valley, over by where I live, and I remember walking through there, and everything was missing but the tofu section, the meatless vegetarian section. I said, so I guess the pandemic is not so bad. Our asses are going to eat vegetarian, but everything else is missing. All the pig's feet, all that nonsense in the grocery store, gone. Vegetarian, tight.
Tofu. I remember that, yeah. So for us, again, we really helping our state partners at Dieter mitigate the access to UI. We really pivoted. That's not our lane, but we pivoted to help them because that's what the demand was for at that moment. There was no jobs to put people into. As a matter of fact, there was no training to put people into because schools were closed as well. So it was really a stop the bleeding moment where we had to work really hard to help our partners get as many people enroll into their UI as possible so they can start to receive their check. Now, of course, after that, as you know, everybody knows the news that like anything, there was a lot of fraud through the UI, benefits. It got extended, beyond perhaps what people ever expected it would be. There was a brand new additional unemployment called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA, that, really helped, I think, create some of the effects that we're still feeling today. There was a reset of expectations from people who stayed for over a year at home collecting, unemployment or having a paycheck. It really has reset the mindset of many of the workers that perhaps are still not engaged today.
Hence the Great Resignation, right? We've literally, my particular field of work, we did not leave work. We were there every day, right? So, but now I'm seeing more and more of especially my younger millennial staff leaving, 8 years in, 9 years in, they don't have the golden handcuffs like our generation kind of has with, PERS and government pensions and whatnot. So they're leaving. How do we, as a community, because we still have, you and LVGEA chief have done a great job doing our Blueprint 3.0, which talks about our 7 economic sectors of growth, right? These are must-have places. These are not things that are going to be okay with nobody filling them, right? Diesel mechanics, leaders, green energy. These are things we need people in. How do we as a community reset and get people into those spaces?
Yeah, that's the big task at hand, right? There's no easy solution. We were just talking about it yesterday as well, that we have to make sure that all of us know that this is not going to be solved overnight or a month or even a year from now. Why? Because the problem is not just the pandemic. The pandemic accelerated it, but really this labor force shortage that we are facing now and will face for a while is a product of decades of declining birth rates in this nation. So that's where the workforce comes from. So if you're not making babies, you're not making a workforce. So I know you're helping because you have 7 babies, so you're doing your part. But And then also immigration over the last few decades. I know that the recent events are changing.
Always have jokes. You told me don't joke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. We got to scale it back to serious.
Right.
The most recent events, in Ukraine are maybe changing things about immigration. But before this, for the last few decades, immigration rates in the States down, again, contributing to less workforce available. And then on the other side, even more pressure on the problem because more people are retiring. More people are reaching that age, the baby boomer generation. And so, and then to that you add the advent of automation and that the effect on the workplace. It's just a problem that's not going to be solved overnight. But we do have to start doing something. So what are we concentrating on? Next month we will have approximately 30,000 kids graduating Clark County School District. I know we have friends there, Mike Barton, Jesus Jara, who I'm really grateful that they're working with us because I believe that that's our best return on investment, if you will. That's the biggest pool of people. I know some of them will go to college, and they need to because we still need architects, engineers, doctors. But we also know, like you said, that we need diesel mechanics and HVAC technicians. So we got to do a better job in that pipeline. Not right now when they're graduating, but from not just high school, but middle school and elementary school. And I know it's something that Marilyn, our friend Marilyn Kirkpatrick, Commissioner Kirkpatrick cares about as well, is early exposure to the occupations in the 7 industry sectors that you talk about are highlighted in the blueprint. We have to do a better job, more meaningfully connect those young children and their families to these things. And we're doing that because just next door today, that's where Dr. Villalobos is now with our Clark County School District Workforce Fellows, which are helping, again, change that inside the CCSD, if you will, infrastructure. We are embedding now those expertise and those counselors in the high schools so that can start to happen more effectively.
I had a thought and it went away. So
Go ahead.
So as I look at this, and I always hear from a political standpoint, economic growth, which means, we're trying to import more manufacturing here or diversify our economy. So as we're seeing that needle go up, right, and we're wanting to expand that, but yet we're seeing less of a workforce, right? Then we're seeing less of a, I don't want to say less of a motivated workforce, but a workforce that's pivoting. It almost strikes me as a perfect storm, right? So are we at some point as a community going to have to understand that economic growth might not be where we land? We're going to have to land at economic stability, and then we're going to have to learn to operate from within that space. Because I just don't know if at least from my experience in government, that we as a workforce are prepared for that, right? Everybody wants their 2.5% raises, everybody wants their COLAs, everybody wants their that. Well, if the money's not there, if the job's not there, if the economy's not there, those things don't happen. Are we prepared as a community to have those conversations?
That's an excellent point because today at the LVGEA board meeting, I have the fortune to represent Workforce Connections on that organization. They are the largest private public sector board in our region. And they were talking about just that because it's not just the talent availability, the availability of a workforce that drives how many companies can the LVGA recruit to our area. Well, only as many as the workforce can support. But also another thing that we have going now is that water is a huge issue for our valley. I think we've kind of fallen asleep a little bit on that issue of water. It is probably the biggest issue we have, as if that wasn't enough, developable land. So we have, I think, just a few years left of land that we can bring employers into. And why? Because the federal government owns most of the land here in our state. So that's another issue, if you will, limiting the economic growth you talk about. And then finally, again, even though we've made strides on the quality of life here in our valley, meaning when you live here now, you have professional teams to go cheer for. We've always had great park systems, lots of churches. But we have now, we've kind of grown up. We're a big city. We have, you and I have gone to games, see professional hockey, professional football. Yeah. And so, but what's missing here still, we still rank dead last, not just in education. We're kind of getting used to that. And we've talked about how we're going to overcome that, but healthcare, access to quality healthcare here is among the last spots in the nation. And so again, those are things that are, along with what you said, limiting economic growth. And so if we want to have economic growth, we have to have the kinds of conversations that you're talking about, which are very difficult. We got to do something about the water, be smarter, and it's possible. I think I've shared with you stories about how we save water in the hotels. We have to do something meaningful and sustainable about our workforce, the future workforce. We have to do, again, something about elevating the kind of healthcare you can access when you live here in this community. And then, of course, we got to continue to have land if we want to continue to grow.
And the conversation me and you always have is a ready and available workforce, right? So that K through 12, I agree with you completely. Obviously, I work in the kid business, so I'm biased, and I want to see resources spent here. And I always get a little bit frustrated when we talk about education at the same time we spend $750 million on a football stadium, right? So I have my frustrations, right? You're not allowed to say that, right? Because that's
Go Raiders.
Yeah, go Raiders. I love the Raiders, and I love the fact that we've got elected officials here that are bold enough to make bold steps. But I would like to see those same level. And Mr. Sandoval did it, or Governor Sandoval made bold steps in terms of changing the funding mechanisms for our schools here. I think if we as a community want to get serious about a community and attract top-level talent, that's some of the things we're going to have conversations about, is that our K through 12 has got to be as premier as the rest of the world, as our competitors, right? So, I'm super, super excited about the people that we have in place now in all aspects, from, our Commissioner Gibson, who's their current chair, Commissioner Kirkpatrick, who me and you are leaving right after this to go to another one of her community events. Yes, me and you are going to be making lots of tacos. Hopefully we'll see about 5,000-6,000 people out there, right? So we've talked about a lot of things in terms of the growth. As a board member, what do we need to be doing differently that we haven't done to support the vision, the mission, and the values that you're projecting from your side? Where do board members need to be better?
Workforce Connections board members, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and by the way, I agree with you that the investment in education needs to be higher here if we want to compete long term. It just has to be. That's our future workforce. And so whether it's, again, our board members or our local elected officials, we have to change the way, continue to improve the way that we fund education in the state. That I agree with you 100%.
And understand that it's an investment. That is an investment. It's not. We're not throwing money down the hole. We have a superintendent and a board of trustees group that are working together to change the way we do business. So it's an investment. Yep. And we need to stop thinking about it as just more government pork. It is working to shrink the sizes of classes, expose our kids. You did something yesterday, and I hate to knock this conversation off the rails a little bit, but I loved it, the VR. I got to change the oil yesterday. Anybody who doesn't know virtual reality, I was wearing one of the headsets, and I had these little handles, right? And you'd called myself and Mr. Fielder over here, and I got to change the oil on a car wearing VR stuff, right? When we talk about exposure and access, and Barani, who's the president of that company, or the CEO of that company that exposed that to us, that access, he damn near had me in tears, because that's the kind of things that we need to be, those are the kinds of things we need to be giving, especially to our inner city kids who have no idea what an engineer underneath MGM does, or what he makes, or what his job entails. The example that he gave about a young lady not wanting to work in manufacturing because she'd been told for years that this is not, you girls don't do this. And then she put on the VR, she goes, what do you mean? I can do that. And now she's successfully 7-8 years in a manufacturing job. That's the kind of stuff we as a community, I love that. And I hopefully, if it's up to me as a board member, I'm going to be one vote for yes, just because exposure is massive. So I hate to derail us.
No, that's fine. We'll go back to what the board members can do, but to I think add to the point you just made, this kind of technology of today, in this case, virtual reality or augmented reality, it allows, like you said, if we had to build a mechanics pit like the ones you and I grew up with invest in that, still you have to take kids to that. And how many kids can you put through a mechanic pit in a day, in an hour? Virtual reality allows you to scale that experience for a lot less investment, right? But still have the effectiveness, because let's face it, you do it for 100, not all 100 are going to say, I want this career path, but maybe you identify 10. And then you identify 10 for another career path, and so forth. So yes, I think this is where we're going. And back to your question about the board members, I think the biggest success that we've had in our system, again, has to do with board members. What do I mean? 5 years ago, the Las Vegas Clark County Library District who Kelvin Watson is on our board, your peer. He's the executive director of the organization. They opened the doors for us and said, let's do this together. We, before them, if you lived in Mesquite or in Laughlin, you had to get on a bus or 2 or 3 to come into town to access a one-stop center or an American Job Center and access our resources. But thanks to the libraries, we are now there, closer to where people live and work, so they can access our system in Mesquite, in Laughlin. And then after that, of course, here also, libraries in Henderson, North Las Vegas, Boulder City, here in Las Vegas and Clark County. We are up to almost 15 library locations where we have American Job Centers at no cost to us. And now, since then, another board member, Mary Beth Sewell from the Vegas Chamber, said, I want to host an American Job Center in my building that's for employers. And so we opened our Employee MV Business Hub, which we're getting the award next week. Then the cities of Henderson and North Las Vegas said, we want to host also. And so all these, CSN, Dr. Zaragoza, again, another member of our board.
Our first high school that's going to be built will host one.
So after CSN, thank you. Now, so that Dr. Jara, another board member, said, we're going to build our first high school in the nation that has an American Job Center built into it. So
5 harbors.
And then now Jack Martin, who's another member of our board, is embedding our services into Harbor. So this is, I think, what board members can do, have done, can continue to do to really elevate our work. What does that all mean, though? Is it just that we're in buildings? It means that as of today, the Harbors will add to it. So will the school that Dr. Jara is opening and his team. But as of today, we are avoiding, if you will, almost $1 million in rent and utilities that we would pay to have those facilities because we're in these other facilities. And that $1 million can serve that many more kids, that many more job seekers, that many more businesses.
Well, that's one of the things I remember, and I appreciate you bringing that up because I remember when I got here, we spent about 33% of our total budget was being spent on administrative workforce expenditures, and I know as a board member, I was not okay with that. And I remember having very serious conversations with you, and we sat down and saying, Jaime, this can't be. And some of the expenditures that we were using were outside of the scope, and you knew that. You were very familiar with that, and you knew that I knew that. So we had some real come to Jesus meetings about those things early on. And you took the bravery to step forward and to make those changes. I remember telling you when you first took the ED, I said, don't worry about your first lawsuit, right? Because you haven't led anything until you've been sued at least once, right? So now you're no longer a
rookie.
I should have put on the Zeus and the Poseidon outfits and like dragging you across the equator, right?
Yeah.
You're now one of us. You're now a dumb rector is what I call myself at my work. So any final thoughts? I know we've been talking here for a while. I know you're probably done with me. Any final thoughts?
I've enjoyed it. This has been easier than I thought. You were, I guess, kind to me. But I would say that, as you said, we have been through hard times. We've made hard choices, but they were the right choices. And I think you all as board members, back to your question, if you and the other folks that we've mentioned from our board and those we haven't mentioned, continue to step up and bring in, sometimes it's resources like buildings that we talked about. Sometimes it's cash. Our chair, Jerry Merritt, and Bank of Nevada donated, cash to us as well, which helps us. I've never felt this level of engagement from board members because they are putting their actions, after their words. They're putting their resources, their buildings, their cash into the mission. Yeah. So I would continue to say, how can board members continue to help? Just that. If you just stay engaged, stay open to new ideas, like, opening the harbors to us. I know we had a great January 12 strategic planning session. We have great communication, so I'm optimistic. I think if that continues to happen, we will continue to experience, positive movement and more positive results here in our valley.
I appreciate you spending time, JC. I obviously appreciate the work you have done as the executive director. I think you have done the yeoman's work. I know it doesn't stop. I know there's always pushback from somewhere. Being the boss is never fun. It's fun sometimes, right? But especially when you're up there catching your Super Bowl award, right, for your your work board of the workforce service industry awards. Very proud to know you. I've loved being able to learn from you. I learn from you all the time. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate how you lead your team. I'm proud to know you. So thank you.
Same here, Jack.
Thank you, brother. Do we have to fire them off some quick questions? All right. What's your favorite baseball team? Better be the Angels, dude.
Angels? Okay, Angels.
Don't even say the A's.
Not the blue team with the LA thing.
No.
The red team from Anaheim.
That's red team. That's right, exactly. Okay. All right, favorite football team, go ahead.
Las Vegas Raiders.
Go Raiders. All right, what else? We have anything else?
Hockey.
What?
Hockey team.
Catch dogs? Oh, cats or dogs?
He knows.
I can see that.
Knows.
Is it creepy when we're doing the meetings and then the cat walks behind him on the thing? That's creepy, dude. Can we keep the cat off the
I try.
Can we please? All right. I can't say anything because I'd be like, Peter would be calling me, like, cats or dogs. All right, Fords or Chevys.
Oh, Chevy.
Of course. There we go.
Yeah, I've learned.
You better be learning. Keep it up. All right, brother. I appreciate you. And thank you again, folks, for watching, what do we call it? The Workforce Podcast. There it is. Thank you.